Shabbat Shalom. So as I say, it's always a pleasure to be here and sharing the Word of God. Shabbat, Vayetze, and he went out. We read from the book of Bereshit, verse 28, 10 to 32, verse 3. Haftorah we read from Hosea 11, 7 to 17. And book of Messianic writing we read from the book of Romans 12, 9 to 21. And he went out. Where to? Or where from? A brief summary of today's parasha. It starts with a statement. Yaakov went from Bereshit and traveled towards Haran. And Yaakov came literally middle of nowhere, certain place, and stayed there overnight. And then he had a dream. Angels going up and down from a ladder, reaching the earth, or reaching the heaven. Adonai appears to Yaakov and promised him the land to him and his descendants. And Jacob sees Rachel, love at first sight, and he wants to marry her. And Laban, Rachel's dad, tricks Yaakov into marrying his elder daughter, Leah. And after 7 years of labor, in exchange for extra 7 years of labor, for exchange for another daughter, which is Rachel. And Jacob have lots of sons with Leah, but Rachel was unable to conceive. And at the end, God blessed Rachel with a son, which she named Joseph. That's it, all done. It's very interesting. Yaakov, I found this parasha extremely interesting in a sense that I draw lots of comparison, lots of questions came to mind. And one of them is, once I read the parasha, why Yaakov? What is that he made? Why him? You know, we read all about Abraham, Isaac, things they did, Moshe. But why Yaakov, the true father of the Jewish people? And we are called his descendants. Yeah, we are descendants of Yaakov, the children of Israel. Why him? When we read the parasha, verse 28, 11 to 12, which says, Then suddenly Adonai was standing there next to him, and he said, I am Adonai, the God of Abraham, your grandfather, the God of Yitzhak. The land on which you are laying, I will give it to you and your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as grains of dust on the earth. You will expand to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. By you and your descendants, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Again, because why him? Why so special? What is special about Yaakov? Because there's not much about him per se. We read about Noah. We know Noah was that faithful man, the righteous, the perfect man in his generation, the man who we know who walked with God. We know about Abraham. He left his land, his birthplace, and his father, his house, in response to that divine call to begin the Jewish journey. Isaac, we know about him. He's the self-sacrifice. We know Moshe, what he did in Egypt. Lead the people out of Egypt and give them the Torah, and the challenge he had to the 40 years in the desert. In a sense, when we read all through this, why not Moshe or Isaac or Abraham, but Yaakov? We know about Yaakov. It's not we know what he did. Deceiving his dad and all that. So why did Yaakov succeed perhaps where Abraham, Isaac failed? What is it that we found in Yaakov that we do not found in the same measure in Abraham or Isaac. And reading this parasha, it gives us some sort of overview, understanding why Yaakov, despite that sort of unclear pedigree, because when you read about Abraham, Isaac, there's lots they've done. Noah, they had the man of God, the man of faith, but there's not much about him. Apart from this parasha, I think that's sort of the picture coming together. The puzzle is forming, but before there's not really much that's sort of linked to that man of God. But God chose him to be the patriarch of the Jewish people, Yaakov, Israel. And it all started when Yaakov was in the middle of his journey from one danger perhaps to the next. He left his home because his brother was literally determined to kill him. He was going to his uncle, again, knowing things are not certain. It's not a safe place for him to be. I believe at this point, if you're coming from a danger, going to a place that you don't perceive to be safe, all you have is hope. I'd imagine. It's that sort of lowest of the lowest point in life, because there's nothing you can do. Everything is out of your control. Where you're coming from, is death. Where you're going is unknown, and perhaps death as well. But one thing the start of Yaakov, he left home, spent the night on mid of nowhere, and use a rock as a pillow, and have that majestic dream that sort of, let's say, kickstart his ascendance to the pedestal, to become what Yaakov is, the man we know today. And it's precisely in these moments, in the middle of nowhere, dark, everything is literally out of your control. There's nothing you can do other than it's dark. You can't walk anywhere. You can't build a house. It's literally, you are vulnerable, to say the least. But was it precisely in these moments that he has that vision, have that spiritual experience that have no parallel when we looked into Abraham, Isaac, or even Moshe? That vision of the ladder stretching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending, in which he was not prepared for. He didn't know that. That was a surprise for him, because he said, surely God is in this place. I didn't know it. He didn't know. How awesome is this place? This is nothing other than the house of God, and this is the gates to heaven. This is for what I read, is the sort of the most significant spiritual encounter Yaakov in Yaakov's life. That is literally the starting point, showing Yaakov, the man of God. That's the beginning of Yaakov. And yet that important moment happened literally in a place that there was no starting point or end point. He was sort of in the middle of nowhere. That's where he stopped, and that's what happened. One of the most important moments in his life. Knowing there's risk, as I mentioned, on both directions, coming from risk, perhaps going for to another trap. But that was the point that he encountered with God. And despite knowing there's no safe net where he's going, he didn't give up. He kept on going. And we can draw parallel with this. with with the journey of Jewish people. We're faced with danger from where we're coming from and where we're going. But the journey didn't stop, continued to go forwards. And this is one of the legacy that Yaakov has left us. Despite the uncertainty, the danger ahead of us, Yaakov kept going, and we also keep going. Because when you look at history, just look going back a little bit. When you look at the Jewish nation, a very small nation, how many tragedies we've survived. No other civilization would survive what the Jewish people went through. Now, I did some research of civilization, and just to refresh my history lesson, I didn't pay my attention. But there are tons of civilizations out there that don't exist anymore. Look at the Mayans, the Hindus, the Vikings. They rose and they fell. Why? There's one thing in common between all these great civilizations. Now, who can tell me one thing in common they had? Can someone tell me? It's a quiz now. No? One thing they have in common. They didn't have the living God. They didn't have faith. This is what all they had in common. They raised, they fell, they stumbled. But look at Jewish history. We have the destruction of the temples. We have the Babylonian, the Roman conquest. We've been scattered all over the world. We have persecutions. We know that the rise of anti-Semitism, not to say the least the Holocaust. But from each of these catastrophes, we seem to, the children, the Jewish people, they tend to renew itself, come up with something, and move on. It's literally one step back, two step forward, one step back, two step forwards. And again, part of a bit of research I did when during the Babylonian exile, the Judaism is deepened. It's that sort of deepened. With the Torah, there was more cohesion, more closeness to God. Again, we have the Holocaust. What happened after the Holocaust? Again, that sort of renewal. The states of 3 years later, we have the states of Israel, a house for the Jewish people, a country for the Jewish people. Then when you go through all this catastrophe, you see from one fall, there's 2 steps up. And it has always been like this. But it's not because we're great people, we're the best, and so on. No, it's because we had faith and we have the living God guiding us, next to us, day in, day out. Just like Jacob on the middle of nowhere, feeling he was alone, but he was not. God was with him. And just reading through one thing that I found it very interesting is these moments of despair that we tend to renew ourselves if we have the living God in us. And one of the questions came up, and I found it interesting. Is it greatness that leads to moments of despair, or moments of despair leads to greatness? And I found it very interesting. Is it that those who are used to stress in their emotional lives find it release in leading exceptional lives? Because when we look closely to Yaakov's life, we can see that he was more emotionally volatile individual than Abraham, who was often calm in the face of great trials. Isaac, again, is kind of fairly stable. Now Yaakov, in the middle of nowhere, he clearly, I believe, he was scared. He feared, Then we know he, love at first sight, he loved. And Jacob spent most of his time on exile, 14 years. More than Abraham, perhaps Isaac. But he never stopped. He continued to move forwards. And the only way, when you are on the bottom of the bottom, there's only one way. When everything's out of your control and nothing you can do, there's only one way. Faith and trust in the Lord. And with this, Jacob, I believe, he sort of gave us that sort of precision and knowledge that when we feel the most lonely, when we think there's nothing else, when we're lost in that darkness, God is still with us. And we saw exactly, there's a perfect example here, Jacob on that, mid of nowhere in the darkness. But he still have that vision, that moment with God. The dream, let's say the great dream. And sometimes our deepest spiritual experience, it might come when we least expect. When you're that close to sort of, breakdown. When we look to the left, there's no hope. We look to the right, look down, we look up, there's nothing. And that's when our, that sort of persona, our mask is kind of stripped away, because there's not, at that point, pretending being strong or being what you really don't are. Doesn't help. And it is at this lowest point in life when we are most fully open to God, and God is most fully open to us. I just read a passage on book of Psalms, verse 34, 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed. We find God not only in the holy, familiar places, but also in the midst of our journey. Alone at night. As we have again one of the very famous song of Solomon. Though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I will feel no evil, for you are with me. And the most profound of all experience when it comes to faith is the knowledge that we are not alone. God is holding us by his hand, sheltering us, lifting us when we fall, forgiving us when we fell short, healing the wounds and the soul through the power of his love. We may fall, but we'll fall into the arms of God. Others may lose faith on us. Even we may lose faith on ourselves, but God never loses faith in us. And we may feel utterly alone, but we're not. God is there, literally beside us, day in, day out. With that sort of encouragement and compromise in us, move on. Let's get up and move on. Because there's a task out there for us to do that we haven't done yet. And our purpose is to fulfill that task that is there for us to do. And Yaakov has shown us how we discover all these things. That we can find God, not just when we are peaceful or when we are in our soul, let's say pedestal. We can find God in synagogue, in temples, outside of these places, far from home, in danger, and so on. And one of the gifts we can take from this parasha is that out of the depths we can reach the heights. And that is literally that vision, the angel reaching the heavens. We don't need to be up there to be closer to God. It's literally sometimes when we are the lowest of the lowest that we can reach him. The deepest crisis of our lives can turn out to be the moments when we encounter the deepest truths and acquire our greatest strengths. On this parasha, Yaakov show us today that God will not let us walk alone or give us more than we can handle. The enemy wants us to be fearful. But as we sang today, when the enemy attack me, he will stumble and fall. And that is true. So we have a verse from Isaiah. I'll say one of my favorite verse here, which says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hands." If this is not enough encouragement, what else do we need? If these words are not warm enough to, make us getting up and go, to comfort us, what else do we need? Shabbat Shalom.